Imagine a time when Rome, in all its grandeur, was engulfed in internal conflicts. Two colossal forces rose to decide the future of one of the greatest civilizations in history. Julius Caesar, ambitious, shrewd, and charismatic, challenged the old order still revered by Pompey, the great general respected by the Senate and the Roman elite. The fate of these two men, who in other times had been allies and even shared family ties, was about to clash irreversibly. The political maneuvers and battles fought throughout the Italian peninsula and beyond would culminate in a decisive confrontation. And amidst all this, the old republic began to crumble, leaving room for the rise of something much greater. Today, we will deepen our journey into this story full of twists, heroic acts, betrayals, and dramatic victories. You will discover how the Battle of Pharsalus became an undeniable milestone that would forever transform the history of Rome. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any video packed with curiosities about ancient Rome and its spectacular intrigues. Now, if you think everything started at Pharsalus, you might be surprised to know that the storm had been brewing long before. And the beginning of the end has much to tell us about how these two giants became mortal rivals. The Twilight of the Republic. The end of the Republic had been foretold for a long time. Expansion wars had drained Rome's coffers, and successive political disputes weakened its institutions. Amidst this chaos, charismatic leaders gained even more power, bolstered by popular support and the legions they commanded. Pompey had already been hailed as the great protector of Rome after his victorious campaigns in the East. He had earned respect and prestige among senators and citizens. However, Caesar's success in Gaul and his growing popular support tipped the scales, creating tensions that quickly became irreconcilable. Beyond politics, there was a crucial human element. Caesar and Pompey already had a familial relationship. Pompey was married to Caesar's daughter Julia, which once consolidated a powerful alliance. However, Julia's death shattered the emotional bridge that once united the two generals, opening the door to distrust. The streets of Rome were divided. On one side, those who saw Pompey as the defender of the traditional republic. On the other, those who recognized in Caesar the promise of reform and progress. No amicable agreement could emerge from this confrontation, and it was just the beginning of a rivalry that would shake the capital of the world. Before unsheathing their swords, Caesar and Pompey had shared the same mantle of power. Want to understand how that relationship crumbled? Let's explore what happened behind the scenes. Allies turned enemies. When they formed the so-called First Triumvirate, Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus, Rome witnessed an unlikely but extremely effective political union. Each brought something different to the alliance. Pompey, with his consolidated military might and the Senate's respect. Caesar, with his captivating oratory and mass support. And Crassus, with his immense wealth. However, Crassus's death during a campaign against the Parthians left a power vacuum. There was no longer anyone to balance the ambitions of Caesar and Pompey. And, while the triumvirate was meant to maintain the status quo, its collapse only accelerated the conflict. Caesar bolstered his reputation as a great strategist during the Gallic Wars, while Pompey remained Rome's greatest hero. The Senate, wary of Caesar's growing influence, gravitated more towards Pompey, trying to use him as a shield against any radical shift in power. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon with his legions, declaring "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, it became clear that there was no turning back. A civil war was inevitable, and every step from then on would lead Caesar and Pompey to a destiny marked by intrigue and epic battles. The civil war was underway, but was fate really sealed? Many battles prior to Pharsalus reveal how both generals were taking opposite paths to seize control of Rome. Rome at war. Caesar's initial strategic moves were bold. He conquered important cities in Italy, almost without resistance, as the reputation of his army was feared. Meanwhile, Pompey retreated to the east, where he had a more solid support base, especially with his naval fleet. Several skirmishes unfolded, and the Senate moved to follow Pompey, showing how the political elite were willing to bet everything on their greatest general. To many, Caesar was nothing more than a usurper breaking ancient traditions. Even so, Caesar's popularity in Rome left no doubt that he was a charismatic leader, capable of mobilizing huge crowds. His veterans followed him with devotion, ready to face the enemy anywhere. The tension increased with each passing day, and even though Pompey won some isolated confrontations, Caesar was relentless. The stage was set for something greater. The time had come for a definitive encounter that would seal the fate of the Republic. When two giants prepare for a final duel, there is no turning back. Are you ready to discover the location chosen for this historic collision? A battlefield in Greece. Pharsalus, in the region of Thessaly, was the chosen stage. Caesar quickly moved his troops toward this fertile valley where he could compensate for his disadvantages. He knew that Pompey would not take long to appear, as he was under pressure from the Roman elite to put an end to Caesar's advance. Caesar's army, about 23,000 men, was tired but confident in the leadership that had already pulled them out of worse situations. Their watchword was discipline. They trusted that Caesar would not launch into a battle without a well-planned trump card. Pompey, on the other hand, was gathering nearly double the forces, along with a sizable cavalry. His senator allies pressured him to end the war once and for all. However, Pompey hesitated too. A mistake against someone as cunning as Caesar could cost everything. They decided to face each other on the plains of Pharsalus. The tension hung in the air, as if the world were holding its breath, awaiting the first clash of swords. One misstep would mean the fall of a giant and possibly the end of the Republic. Before we see what really happened at Pharsalus, you will be amazed by the strategy Caesar had up his sleeve. Get ready to understand how the unexpected can change the course of an entire war. Planning the surprise, Caesar knew his limitations against Pompey's superior cavalry. He needed a ploy that would undermine the enemy's greatest advantage. So he planned to conceal cohorts behind his modest cavalry for a surgical counterattack. The idea was simple, yet brilliant. When Pompey's cavalry advanced to crush his right flank, the cohorts would emerge in a tight formation and attack the horses directly, destabilizing the cavalrymen. This tactic required courage and discipline because if it failed, Caesar's troops would be annihilated. While Pompey relied on numbers, Caesar bet on the quality of his veterans. These men had fought by his side in countless campaigns, knew how to read his signals, and maintained formation even under immense pressure. Have you ever wondered how this event shaped the destiny of an empire? Leave your like now, so we can continue bringing you stories as impactful as this one. After all, every battle hides a lesson that echoes through the centuries. And then the day broke at Pharsalus. Can you imagine the silence filled with tension? Before the trumpet sounded, let's see how the two armies faced each other and who took the first step into the field of blood. The first clash. The sun had barely risen on the horizon when both forces formed their battle lines. On one side, Caesar's legions, organized in 3 ranks, waiting for instructions to advance. On the other, Pompey's army, confident in its overwhelming numerical advantage and ready for a decisive offensive. Pompey, still apprehensive, ordered a more defensive initial posture, expecting Caesar to advance and wear down his own troops. Perhaps he hoped that the enemy, weakened by the long campaign, would eventually fall into his trap. However, Caesar was not one to hesitate. He commanded his legions to march forward, advancing in a firm and calculated manner. The clash of swords was preceded by the roar of soldiers, war cries blending with the sound of clashing metal. As the centers of the forces collided, Pompey's cavalry shifted to Caesar's right, as expected. Thus began the grand move Pompey believed to be the key to his triumph. But little did he know, Caesar had a hidden strike prepared. Everything was going according to Pompey's plans. But would Caesar allow the enemy to easily destroy his flank? Discover how the trap was sprung at the precise moment. The trap is sprung. Pompey's cavalry advanced, secure in its imminent victory. Caesar's smaller cavalry tried to resist, but soon retreated to lure the adversary further into the lines. At that moment, the infantry cohorts emerged from their hiding place. Caesar's order was clear: attack the horses. This was unusual, as the usual focus was on destabilizing the cavalrymen, but Caesar knew that if the animals were brought down, the enemy troops would quickly become disorganized. It worked like a masterstroke. The rapid advance of the cohorts caught Pompey by surprise. His cavalry, in panic, fled in disorder. The pride of Pompey's army was defeated in a matter of minutes, leaving the entire flank exposed. As Pompey's cavalry disappeared from view, the rest of his troops lost confidence. Caesar seized the moment to launch a powerful frontal attack, intensifying the pressure on the enemy lines. Pompey saw his army beginning to crumble, and with that, the hope for victory dissipated. And what does a general do when he sees his troops succumbing? Pompey had to face the unimaginable: defeat. Let's understand what happened in those crucial moments that changed the course of Rome forever. The fall of a giant. Pompey's left flank, which depended on the success of his cavalry, became completely vulnerable. Caesar's legions advanced like an unstoppable wave, and Pompey's command became confused. He couldn't reorganize his troops as they gradually surrendered or fled. Having lost control, Pompey did the unthinkable for a commander of his stature. He abandoned the battlefield, retreating before even making a final attempt at resistance. The scene was desolate. Senators accompanying him also fled, without leadership and without direction. That day, about 15,000 Pompeians lost their lives, and more than 20,000 were captured. It was clear proof that in that war, strategy and discipline mattered just as much as numerical strength. As the sun set, Caesar emerged as the great victor. But he knew the cost was high. Rome would never be the same, and Pompey's flight meant that dangerous repercussions would still unfold beyond Italy's borders. Could Pompey have had a chance to recover? He set off in search of support. But fate awaited him in a tragic manner. See how history can be cruel even to the most renowned of generals. The escape and betrayal in Egypt. In the hope of gathering new forces, Pompey headed to Egypt, a kingdom then ruled by the young Ptolemy III, whose throne was also contested by Cleopatra. Pompey believed that, with his fame, he would be well received and find allies to rebuild his strength. However, the Egyptian court feared Caesar. Knowing that Pompey had arrived defeated, Ptolemy's advisors decided that the best way to please the victor was precisely to eliminate Pompey. They planned a fatal welcome. When Pompey landed, he was approached by men who pretended to offer him assistance, but in the act, they ruthlessly stabbed him. They severed his head and delivered it as a gift to Caesar in an attempt to win the conqueror's favor. To the Egyptians' surprise, Caesar did not celebrate. Historical accounts say that he wept upon receiving Pompey's head. More than a rival, Pompey had been a great commander and, in other times, a respected ally. That cowardly death, in Caesar's view, was not worthy of a Roman general. Pompey's death marked the end of a personal dispute. But what happened next changed the course of Rome forever. Are you ready to understand the final impact of this decisive battle? Consequences and legacy. With Pompey out of the picture, Caesar faced no more resistance capable of matching his might in controlling Rome. He returned to Egypt to resolve internal matters and support Cleopatra, involving himself in one of the most talked about alliances in history, both politically and romantically. Caesar's power grew to the point where he was named dictator for life. The Republic, already weakened, became only a shadow of its ancient traditions, paving the way for a new era. The Roman Empire, which would consolidate itself a few years later. For the senators and nobles who had lost their prestige, only fear or conspiracy remained. They knew that Caesar was growing ever more powerful, and Rome's destiny seemed to no longer include the Senate as the main protagonist. The Battle of Pharsalus not only defined winners and losers, but also showed that the Roman world was undergoing a dramatic transformation. Even though Caesar was assassinated years later in a senatorial conspiracy, the movement that began there could not be undone. The centralized power in the hands of one man became the hallmark of the empire that would span centuries. The sands of Pharsalus told a vital chapter of this epic journey. We are faced with a story that combines the might of armies, the genius of generals, and the unpredictable nature of politics. The Battle of Pharsalus was just one of the milestones in a grand transition, the end of old institutions and the birth of a centralized power that would guide Rome to an extraordinary destiny. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and share this video with your friends. This was our journey through the final confrontation between Caesar and Pompey, a moment that redefined the course of an entire civilization. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video about ancient Rome and the Empire.